Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations in the Future of Work. This has been a super exciting season. We've had such amazing guests, and we're continuing in that vein today with another fresh face for us here at Virtual Sapiens on our talk show. Stephanie Thoma, welcome.
Hi, Rachel. I'm so excited for us to dive in here. Lots of good stuff to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about your background, what you're up to these days?
Yes, so I'm the author of a book called Confident Introvert, a practical guide to connecting with others at networking events and beyond, based on hosting a high volume of networking events in San Francisco. And these days, I actually live in New York City and I work with speakers. I'm going to be starting a teaching role at Barnard through TED, helping people with their keynote talks. And that all stemmed from when I started professionally public speaking and helping people with their networking skills. And now it's kind of meta. It's like, oh, now I'm helping people with their public speaking skills.
Awesome. That's great. Very, very cool stuff. So it's interesting because I feel like this debate of introvert, extrovert, and what does it mean? And are you really just one 100%, or are you a little mix of both? Does it depend on the context? Is something that I love talking about. We can get into that maybe later a little bit because I think it would be interesting to understand like a little bit more about how you kind of define those terms. But let's go in a little gently here. So you do tend to work with leaders who are looking for visibility, but being thoughtful about it, maybe a little hesitant about how to go about that in a way that's authentic and effective. So why do you feel like some of that preliminary hesitation or really wanting to be thoughtful about it can actually be turned into an advantage versus maybe just like opening the floodgates?
People that want the spotlight for the sake of being in the spotlight may not have the audience in mind. So when you are thoughtful about showing up, not from a self-conscious lens, but from a lens of, I want this to actually help people, then that can benefit you. It's really a fine line where you're having fun up there, but if it's only about you having fun, you're kind of missing the point, because ideally a compelling public speaker is inspiring, is relaying information, right? We think about professors, think about inspiring speakers. I personally like to coach people to be both. And that can come with people who are more naturally on the introverted side. Maybe there's a bit more introspection there. And not to knock anyone who identifies as more extroverted, but having that knowledge of self and maybe questioning who you are less can translate in connecting with your audience better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so how would you define, or how do you define, like, what does it mean to be an introvert for you?
In a nutshell, it's where you get your energy from. Introverts tend to get their energy from solitude. So that could be activities like reading, writing, meditating, being away from people. But as you mentioned earlier, it's context dependent. So not every person is going to be depleting to someone who's more introverted. And then extroverts tend to get their social battery filled up through socializing. So I like to think of it as a battery, and your battery is being depleted. So while you're socializing, if you're more classically introverted, and it's being filled up if you're more classically extroverted. But that being said, I do believe most people are ambiverts, a combination of the two, because context matters so much. The average person that you interact with could be your best friend that you feel really relaxed around. It could be a high stakes interview where you feel like, oh my gosh, I really have to show up in a special way here.
Yeah. Very interesting. So I'm happy to hear that that's kind of how you define these things, because I know many people, and I'm sure we all do, who will identify as an introvert or as an extrovert, and that's all fine. And but then I also observe that people will tend to use those terms as like an excuse to not participate when it's convenient for them. Because then I've also seen, like, for example, someone in my family is like a diehard introvert. And yet this person's a geologist. Okay, so like total rock nerd. And I've seen this person in a room full of other geologists, like the absolute star of the room. And so to me, I'm like, I don't see how you can identify as an introvert when it literally just depends on who you're talking to and whether you're actually interested in the topic or not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot coming up here. Family dynamics is a whole other bag of worms, but it comes down to interest, value alignment. It comes down to emotional safety, how talkative someone might be. And I mean, family dynamics, I would even wonder this person, do you feel like they integrate fully into the family system? Or are they kind of an outlier? Those are things to consider.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm using this person as an example. I have plenty of friends who are similar. I just think it's interesting. My view of social, really anything, is that it's all skills to develop, right? And so I just think when people are like not interested in something and they're like, oh, I can't do that because I'm an introvert or whatever. And you're like, I know that you're not actually fully an introvert. To your point, you're more of an ambivert. It depends on the context, right? And so, anyways, I just think it's interesting when, like, do you feel like sometimes people use these terms as a way to, like, what is it when you like
So
opt out?
selectively choosing,
Yeah,
oh, now I'm going to put that hat on and let everyone see it, and then that will allow me to be hidden. Well, you know what I actually see more often?
yeah.
People, well, especially in the speaker world, people who appear extroverted but are actually introverted.
No, for
So,
sure.
yeah, but I mean, this phenomenon of what you're describing is a fixed versus a growth mindset, right?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Yeah, so it's like, do people, or maybe one of your listeners, if they've ever said, like, okay, I want to take myself off the hook, and this is just who I am. I am someone who's behind the scenes, right? That can be a label that we put on, and there can be a variety of reasons for that. There could be maybe one time there was visibility or the spotlight, and you totally choked, and it's imprinted in your subconscious, and you were just like, nope, not going to do that again. That really was unpleasant. Or maybe the times when you've spoken up for yourself, it hasn't always gone well. There are a variety of different reasons why people make the decision to, and they can confuse it with a standard or a way of being, when in reality, I think there's an opportunity to replace this judgment and this static decision with curiosity. And the question isn't, should I got this all the time, should I network? And then people think I should. Okay, yeah, that's not a compelling answer because you should.
Yeah.
The average person who values authenticity, they're not impressed with should language. So it comes down to, wait, is this actually something untapped that could be a skill? The skill not being, can I be in front of people and have them enjoy watching me? I mean, that's one thing, right? If you want to be in a play, that's great. But if you want to be, in particular, someone who's a compelling public speaker, whether it be on a stage, or I like to use the term speaking in public. Maybe
Yeah.
you're in high level networking environment, you're at a networking dinner, whatever it is, where you have these micro moments where people ask questions and you don't even know who's listening. And it's important to be able to be conversational, succinct, and clear about what you stand for. There's an opportunity to introduce that curiosity and ask, but wait, could that be fun if I was good at that or if I felt comfortable? And really circling it back to being of service, where what you're speaking about, what you're doing in the world is not just for tooting your own horn, it's not just for your own benefit.
Yeah.
It's this symbiotic relationship that helps things function and actually has a genuinely positive impact. And if you don't feel confident in that, then it's time to brush up on your skills or maybe redefine what you're leading with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you've said a few things that I find are critical. I think first and foremost, really having a deeper understanding of your own values and goals, right? Because, in the facilitation and coaching that I've done in leadership presence, right? It's the same thing. You can't just like slap on certain hand gestures or like like you can't slap on a smile and then expect people to believe you if it's not coming from a place of like connection to something deeper, right? And so the identification of goals, values, right, like wants and desires really is going to be like the first step. Being curious, to your point too, I love that word, because I think if you can be curious about other people, that's a an amazing quality to have as a human being. And that is what can really drive meaningful connection, or at least get you to more meaningful connection, right? When there's some real curiosity about other people. And then, of course, the last thing you mentioned about like, okay, so if there's not a feeling of confidence there in terms of, oh, hey, I can walk into a room with total strangers, which for many people I think is a complete nightmare. You know, you walk into a room full of strangers and you're confident that you can walk up to anyone and strike up a smooth conversation, right? If you don't feel confident in that, then like, okay, then it's time to start thinking about developing some of those skills. If it's something that you want to do, right? If there's a reason that you would be walking into a room full of strangers, right?
And to take another angle here, the reason of having felt isolated or not connected is enough of a reason to want to brush up on your skills so that you are that welcoming presence in any room that you're in. And what was coming up for me when you brought up this idea and this reality of walking into rooms where you don't know anyone, and maybe you're in a career transition, or maybe you don't know your elevator pitch or how to define yourself, you get to tap into your inherent value as a human and your curiosity in other people. And if someone asks what you do, you don't need to say, oh, I don't know, or I'm in transition, I'm fun employed, or, you know, whatever it is. You get to you choose how you define yourself at any time. You can talk about a hobby you love. You know, who says that you need to tell everyone your job title and your I help statement? Let's get creative here. If it is about human connection, those things come later. In my experience, sometimes I don't even learn someone's name until after speaking with them for a half an hour.
Right, absolutely. Do you know Alison Brooks? Alison Wood Brooks?
Not by name.
So she's the author of a book called Talk, The Art of Conversation and Knowing Oneself. I think that's the full title. She's brilliant. And anyway, she talks about some of these same, like she has a class at HBS with these super successful professionals, and it is one of the most popular classes, right? Because everyone wants to feel comfortable striking up conversation, having the conversation feel interesting and like light or meaningful or whatever's appropriate given the context, and not be immediately going to questions like, what do you do? Mm-hmm. Where did you go to school? Right? Because I think that I think that there are like studies out there or whatever that are like, oh, like the quality of a conversation is like, you know, dependent on how long have you been talking before you ask for the person's name, or like how long have you been talking before, like some of these, like these standards, like what do you do for a living, you know, what school did you go to, or like whatever, those like kind of more classic questions, status questions, right, mm-hmm. come up versus, you know, trying to figure out who this person is. Anyways, fascinating. So going back to these professionals that you work with, so there's often like a pressure for them, and I think for everyone, but I'm assuming for everyone you work with, right? They're feeling some kind of pressure to perform online or on stage, right? Which is why they're coming to you. How, you've touched on this a little bit, but just to really kind of capture it a little further, how can leaders show up with visibility and credibility without feeling like they have to force, as we've kind of touched on already, force this extroverted style?
There is a topic that I've been speaking more about lately, and it's called calm authority. It's knowing what you stand for and being able to embody this sense of not necessarily enthusiasm and jumping up and down on stage and Tony Robbins style rah-rah. It's less about that, and it's more about having the quiet confidence of, you know, if we look at speakers like Brene Brown, Barack Obama, for a couple of examples, that are articulate, are engaging, but they're not over the top. They're more conversational with their audience. So, you know, you mentioned, and I want to be sure I'm answering this correctly, right? You mentioned this sort of bridging of the gap between building rapport and insinuating credibility. And some people lead with credibility, and, you know, that can be useful if, let's say, you're on a stage and people don't know who you are, and maybe they're even thinking like, who is this person? Should I even listen to them? Then it can actually be helpful to name drop, you know, a credential and then move on. But I would say it's even more powerful, especially in one-to-one conversations and when you're not on a stage and you're out in the world with people. It can become almost subconsciously competitive for some people. If you lead with credentials, then someone else may feel like, oh shoot, oh yeah, I've done that too in the past, or oh yeah, like, and it kind of erodes the possibility of that connection. It becomes a hurdle to overcome instead of being disarming and leading with being genuinely curious about the other person. And let's say that you're both at the same event, both at the same dinner, questions, relational questions. And, in my book, I call these conversational sponges. We want them to be open-ended. We want them to sort of be the tipping point of just expanding this, this point of connection, right? So questions like how do you know the hostess? Or what talk have you liked best so far? Assuming there's a speaker series going on. Or even starting with a genuine compliment. And if you really like, and actually I make the case for this all the time, if you have an eclectic style or you've been curious about it, these are not the pink glasses, but earlier in my networking journey, I had a pair of even brighter pink glasses, and they became a staple. And I noticed people would forget my name sometimes, but remember, oh, the woman in the pink glasses. So, that can become a conversation starter and a point of intrigue and almost like a nonverbal invitation for people to approach.
Right. So you've mentioned a few of these like great examples of more open-ended questions, right? That get, I think, closer to people's actual interests, right? Because again, like you could walk into a room full of people, 50% of them are probably introverts, which means that the first person you might pick to say hello to could be an introvert, right? So that person can either like shy away because they're immediately not interested in asking about what they do for a living, or you can ask questions like this and hopefully trigger some of that, them talking about something they're actually interested in, right? Which, like from an energy perspective, is completely different. So that's, I think, strategically really fantastic. And then you mentioned, so what if someone like doesn't have eccentric style and is more demure with the way they dress? What are some other ways people like that could possibly, I don't know.
And this is so common on the East Coast, for example, where
Yeah.
black is oftentimes the uniform.
Yes.
So it's certainly not all about being loud non-verbally with your attire, right? It's also setting the intention before you leave your home that, okay, I'm open to connecting. I don't need anything from anyone. If you feel like you're going somewhere with the intention of, oh, I need this, like I need to make a friend, I need a job, I need whatever it is, a client, then that's repelling. So from an unspoken, unseen lens, the energy that you bring, if you've ever gotten the compliment, I love your energy, you have great energy, that's something that can come naturally to some people. But also, I'm an avid meditator. I recommend that all of my clients get into a meditation practice of some kind that works for them, because that is one way to be able to show up with an element of level-headedness and embodying that sense of calm authority, right? That gets to come naturally, that people feel at ease around and that people would like to have in their world.
Yeah, there's something you said that I wanted to expand on. Gosh, what did you just say about, oh man, I've lost it. It was good too.
Yeah, we were talking, okay, so earlier, I know I was like triple barreling there a few things when it comes to when you leave your home and the intention that you
That's
set.
what it was.
Yeah, so that
That's what it
actually,
was.
I'm borrowing that from Kabbalah. I'll, it's
Yeah.
a Kabbalist way of being. And I think that, people can pick and choose from different spiritualities and faiths, what works for them. I really like that
Yeah.
tidbit right there, where we're really conscious of the energy of taking or giving and receiving,
Yes.
right? Where sometimes, let's say if we are public speaking and we think, oh, I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart, and I really want to help people, but actually it's because you want to get that applause and you want to sign a client and it's kind of something that you need, then people can see through that and it's repelling. So
Yeah.
being really conscious, and this goes back to the introspection piece. Most the people that I work with, they're not on this planet to have things look a certain way.
Hmm.
They're here to for the feeling that they have and that others get to have in their presence, as well as, of course, tangible results, right? We're
Yeah.
results oriented people.
Hmm.
But we also know that there's more to it than that. It's not just what you see is what you get.
Yeah.
There's subtext. There's there are these unspoken feelings that make people want to invite you in or shut you out.
Yeah.
And while it can feel like we don't have control over it, you know, another component is being okay with being polarizing. Sometimes when you're just yourself in your most relaxed energy, some people are still not going to like it. But it's
Yeah.
not your job to convince them
Yeah.
to. And
Right.
in my experience, not everyone, but some people, if you don't amplify the, dislike or whatever you're kind of
Yeah.
experiencing, then it can turn around.
Yeah.
Give,
Totally.
give it some time, and
Yeah.
there are other touch points.
Yeah.
And, it's, yeah, energy. That is a whole other topic.
So what I wanted to ask, you work with founders a lot, right?
Yes, and executives.
Right. So, I mean, particularly, what stage founders? Does it kind of run the gamut, or?
So I've worked with people on their second act or early stage founders or those making the transition. Maybe they're still in their 9 to 5
Yeah.
and they're thinking, oh, I have these aspirations
Right.
to speak, maybe on behalf of my company to start, but then I have my own
Right.
topics that are
Yeah.
more personal development focused.
Right. So, if a founder is going through the fundraising journey, right, and they're going to go to these networking events where they know there will be investors, and like they know that they have to target the investors in the room, and they got to get their pitch out, right, and blah blah blah. So, how do you reconcile those needs with going into a room and having and like not having that like intense energy that is
Yeah.
like driven by your needs?
I personally prefer to attend events and not have a hit list. It feels really intense. Um, However, if there are some people that you want to meet, it's important to allow it to be as in flow as it can be.
Yeah.
If you see someone from across the room and you dart towards them, that's kind of scary. So to be able to, there may never be the perfect time. And I would say if there is, maybe you don't prioritize speaking with every single investor in there. If you want to do your research, identify one or maybe two that are your top priority, right?
Right.
And then front load those connections.
Hmm.
Don't psych yourself out and say, oh, I'm going to warm up socially first. And then, oh, they're the big ones for the grand finale. What if they leave early? What if they have a line of people waiting for them?
Hmm.
So earlier is better. So
Yeah.
entering the room, doing a quick scan, and orienting yourself physically close to where they are. So then
Yeah.
it's more natural to say
Yeah.
hi. Or if you notice, oh, interesting, I think that person, recognizing them from LinkedIn, I think they're an investor that I want to speak with. They seem to be in line at the bar, even in line at the restroom, assuming that you're using the same restroom.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to strike up a conversation that
Hmm.
is more conversational, that is certainly not starting with, hi, my name is, and this is my company,
Yes.
but that's more curious about
Yes.
them and maybe
Right.
not even work related. We're not
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, aren't you so and so? That comes off as more starstruck, less connecting.
Yeah.
But to be able to lead with genuine curiosity about the human things. Oh, interesting. Oh, have you tried this dish before? I haven't. I'm curious about this. Or,
Yeah. Hmm.
very having that human connection first.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I think it's even more powerful if you connect on a human level and get their personal contact so that
Hmm.
you can follow up and have a virtual coffee or in person and go deeper. That's not to say to blow your moment,
Hmm.
but you know, if you do connect on more of that human level, to to not waste time, to be able to say, oh, actually, I'd love to connect, or like, what's the best email for you? And then to plant a seed of, what you're up to in the world and how it benefits them. Not just like, oh, I need funding because this. It's more about, oh yeah, and I think I've read that that you focus that you work with companies that XYZ, and where you're able to really succinctly tie in, not a big pitch about your whole company, but more about the ethos that you both already have in common.
Right. Yeah, I think the most important thing for founders to keep in mind is that this like say and spray approach is the same thing with sales, right? Like, sure, you can try to just like smash the numbers and you will probably end up making more enemies or annoying more people than you will actually end up making genuine connections. So the better strategy, even if there's 15 investors in this room that you'd like to talk to, is to pick the like top 3 most important or most interesting to you or most aligned with you. Do some of that deeper research and be able to confidently go into the conversation speaking about something that you think will trigger their interest, right? Because you also have to keep in mind their perspective, that they're being bombarded daily with hundreds of pitches, right? And so if you can make someone feel connected and interested in a discussion that you're having, right, the likelihood of there being a kernel of rapport that you can build on is much higher than, slapping them with your pitch, right? So, yeah, I don't think it's, I think it's, for founders, you just have to go in with that kind of super refined, well-researched strategy if you want to come out successful. I don't think you can go into a room full of people and like hope to connect with the investors that you most need to connect with. So I think there's a balance between really being diligent and clear with what your goals are. And of course that does mean that you introduce a bit of pressure, but if you're able to then also have a nice balance of like trying to find a flow with it, to your point, I think that's obviously much more comfortable and easeful for everyone. But it's pretty tricky. I think it's
and
always
also
hard.
Another thing that comes up here is sometimes when there's hierarchy involved and there is this idea of human capital and feeling like, okay, these investors are more inherently valuable, at least in this context, right? And then, oh, like, but who am I? What I see a lot with many of the people that I serve and work with is what I call identity lag. And it's this idea and concept of showing up in a way that is actually a past version of self versus where you actually have built yourself up to be. So this can come into play when there is some sort of an emotional trigger around worthiness or around, does this person care what I have to say? Is it good enough for them? And all of those sorts of things. And that keeps us from connecting with other people when we're in our own heads about our own value or our own worth. So I know that term can be revelatory for some people that are like, wait, I don't have imposter syndrome per se, but sometimes it's time to upgrade your identity and how you view yourself. It's not always about having other people see you a certain way, because when you view yourself a certain way, then you're able to attribute meaning differently to how people are responding to you. Yeah.
We'll have to do a part 2, but obviously everyone needs to read your book. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today before we wrap up?
Let's see. Well, I would say if your audience is interested in diving deeper into calm authority and identity lag and some of these terms, I put them in the Calm Authority workbook. It's a free resource, so that can be found at stephaniethoma.com/resources.
Okay, amazing. So we'll call that out when we promote this, but yeah, such interesting stuff. And really looking forward to sharing this with our audience. So the best ways to connect with you are?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I have the Confident Introvert voice that goes out a couple times a month. And also, if you would like to connect with me weekly, then stephaniethoma.com/newsletter is the place to do that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Stephanie. You've shared so many interesting and critical concepts with us today in a very clear way. So thank you so much for showing up and for sharing so many insightful things.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And as always, thanks to everyone for listening in. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you next time.